I never thought I'd be the kind of man who would betray his own brother by sleeping with his young wife. But here I am, completely addicted to my seductive sister-in-law who now lives under the same roof as us. If you've ever wondered how one forbidden touch can ruin everything, stick with me. This is my raw, unfiltered confession. I promise to tell you every guilty detail, starting from the day my ordinary, struggling life as a mid-level office worker changed forever. My wife and I had been married for 5 years in this cramped two-bedroom apartment. I was still hunting for something better after my last company downsized. Every morning the same dull commute, every evening the same quiet arguments about money that never seemed to stretch far enough. Life felt stuck, like we were both holding our breath, waiting for something to shift. Then my younger brother called one evening, his voice crackling through the phone from overseas. His new wife, Lily, needed a place to stay while he finished a 6-month contract, just until he could sort things out. "She's family," he said. "You two will take good care of her, right?" I agreed without thinking twice. She arrived one rainy afternoon, suitcase wheels splashing through puddles outside our building. When I opened the door, there she was, 22, fresh-faced, with that shy smile that made the corners of her eyes crinkle. Her perfume hit me first, soft jasmine mixed with something warmer like vanilla lingering on warm skin. I helped carry her suitcase inside, fingers brushing the damp strap, and something in me stirred. A quiet pull I immediately tried to ignore. At first I told myself it was nothing, just natural politeness toward family. Lily moved into the guest room with such quiet grace, unpacking her things while humming softly under her breath. She was only 22, her skin still carrying that untouched glow, her body curvy in ways my wife no longer seemed to be after years of the same routine, the same tired days. I resisted even looking too long. "She's your brother's wife, you idiot. Don't even let the thought form." I repeated it like a mantra while we ate dinner that first night. My wife chatting easily with her, the three of us squeezed around our small table. Lilith's laugh was light, almost musical, and when she passed me the salt, her fingers hovered just a second too close to mine. I pulled back quickly, heart thudding. That night, as I lay in bed next to my sleeping wife, the apartment felt smaller than ever. The faint scent of her jasmine lotion drifted from the guest room. Sweet, warm, impossible to escape. It wrapped around me in the dark, making my pulse race with a guilt I hadn't turned yet. I turned over, pressing my face into the pillow, telling myself to stop. This was nothing. It had to stay nothing. But the next morning the air already felt thicker. Mornings became dangerous without me realizing how quickly it happened. Lily would wake early to make coffee, moving quietly in the kitchen while my wife got ready for work. She wore those thin tank tops that clung to her skin from the summer heat, the fabric damp where it touched her shoulders. I'd walk in half asleep, and there she'd be. Hair still messy from sleep, smiling at me over the rim of a mug. We started sharing small conversations while my wife was gone. Nothing important. Just her laughing at my lame jokes about the terrible office coffee, her fingers brushing mine when she handed me a fresh cup. Each time that warmth lingered, an accidental graze that sent electricity racing up my arm. I hated how good it felt. An internal voice screamed, "Stop. This is wrong. She belongs to your brother," but another whispered, "Just this once. It feels too good to ignore." Weeks slipped by and the proximity turned into something obsessive. We'd watch TV together after dinner on that narrow couch, her leg occasionally pressing against mine when she shifted. The heat of her skin through thin fabric made it impossible to focus on anything else. One evening a slow romantic song played on the radio, the same one my brother had once dedicated to her on their wedding day. Instead of changing the station, she hummed along softly, her eyes meeting mine across the dim light. There was a heat in that look that twisted my stomach into knots. I hated how much I wanted her in that moment. Yet I couldn't stop replaying the silkiness of her hair when it had accidentally brushed my arm earlier that day. The scent of jasmine still clung to the air between us. And I was already drowning. Mornings carried a new weight now, the kind that settled heavy in my chest before I even opened my eyes. Lily moved through the kitchen like she belonged there, barefoot on the cool tiles, her laughter bubbling up over nothing when I shuffled and still rubbing sleep from my face. My wife had already left for her shift, the door clicking shut behind her like a warning I chose to ignore. We talked about ordinary things. The rain that wouldn't stop, the neighbor's barking dog, how the coffee tasted better when she made it. But her voice wrapped around each word, soft and close, and every time she leaned forward to pour, the thin strap of her top slipped just enough to reveal the curve of her shoulder. He rose from her skin, carrying that jasmine scent mixed with something sweeter like sun-warmed fruit. My hand hovered near hers on the counter, an inch away, trembling with the urge to close the distance. "Stop," the voice in my head hissed. "She's family. Your brothers." Yet my body leaned in anyway, drawn by gravity I couldn't name. The days blurred into this careful dance. Evenings found us on the couch after dinner, the apartment quiet except for the low hum of the television. She'd curl her legs beneath her, and sometimes her knee would rest against my thigh, warm through the thin fabric of her shorts. I pretended to watch the screen, but all I felt was the steady rhythm of her breathing, the way it quickened when our eyes met by accident. One night a slow song drifted from the radio, the notes heavy with longing. She didn't change it. Instead, her fingers tapped lightly on her knee, inches from mine, and when she hummed the melody her voice trembled just a little. The air between us thickened, charged like the moment before thunder. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, imagining what it would feel like if I reached over, just to brush her hand. Nothing more. I can't want this. But the ache grew anyway, a slow burn spreading under my ribs. Then came the storm. My wife had gone to her parents for the weekend, leaving the apartment feeling too empty, too full of possibility. Lightning cracked outside, and the power flickered out, plunging us into sudden darkness. Lily's gasp cut through the rain pounding against the windows. "I'm scared of thunder," she whispered, her voice small in the black. I lit a candle, the flame dancing across her face as she stepped closer. Her hand found mine in the dim glow, palm soft and slightly damp, fingers curling instinctively around my own. The warmth of her seeped into me, traveling up my arm like liquid fire. We stood there, bodies inches apart, her breath coming in shallow bursts against my chest. Without thinking, I pulled her nearer, one arm sliding around her waist. She didn't resist. Her head tucked under my chin, hair brushing my neck, and for a long moment we just breathed together. Her heartbeat thudded against me, fast and unsteady, matching my own. The scent of her filled my lungs, jasmine, vanilla, and the faint salt of nervous sweat. Every inch of her molded so perfectly it hurt. We didn't kiss, but the hug lingered far too long, her body pressing closer when another rumble shook the walls. My hand rested at the small of her back, feeling the heat through her thin shirt, the subtle tremble that told me she felt it too. When we finally stepped apart, the candlelight caught her eyes, wide and glistening, and something unspoken passed between us. That night I lay awake in my bed, the storm still raging outside. The memory of her softness clung to me like a second skin. My mind replayed every second, the way her breath had hitched, the almost imperceptible way her fingers tightened on mine. Guilt crashed over me in waves, cold and relentless. What have I done? This is how betrayals begin. Yet even as shame burned my cheeks, the craving lingered, quiet and insistent, pulling me under like a current I was too weak to fight. The next morning the power returned, but the air in the apartment had shifted forever. Lily avoided my gaze at first, cheeks flushed when she handed me breakfast, but later, while clearing the table, her hip brushed mine in the narrow space, and neither of us moved away quickly. The electricity was still there, humming beneath the surface. I hated myself for noticing. I hated how much I needed it to happen again, and deep down I knew the next time the lights went out, or the next time we found ourselves alone, the distance between us would close just a little more. Guilt trapped around me like smoke that wouldn't clear, no matter how many times I told myself to forget that night. In the shower the next morning, hot water running down my back, my mind betrayed me again. The memory of her body so close, the way her breath had trembled against my chest. It made my pulse spike. I pressed my forehead to the cool tiles, whispering under the spray, "She belongs to your brother. Stop this." But my hands remembered the curve of her waist, and the ache only deepened, pulling tighter with every drop that fell. Days blurred after that. I'd catch myself in the kitchen, eyes drifting to the soft line of her neck while she stirred something on the stove, the steam curling around her like a secret. She moved with this quiet grace, humming low under her breath, and each time our paths crossed in the tight space, the air grew heavier, warmer. One afternoon she complained her shoulder felt tight from sleeping wrong. "Just a quick rub?" she asked, voice soft, almost shy, as she sat on the edge of the couch. And I worked slowly, feeling the tension ease under my touch. Her head tilted slightly, a small sigh escaping her lips. Not quite a sound, but enough to make my breath catch. I leaned in without meaning to, my mouth brushing the side of her neck, light as a whisper. Electricity crackled between us, her skin flushing under the faint contact. "We can't," she breathed, but her body leaned back into me. Just a fraction, the pull undeniable. We stayed like that longer than we should have, my hands still on her, her breathing uneven, matching the storm building inside my chest. The scent of her lotion mixed with the faint warmth of her skin, wrapping around me until I felt dizzy with it. When I finally stepped back, her eyes met mine, dark and searching, full of the same war I was losing. I wanted to say something, anything to break the spell, but the words stuck, heavy with everything I couldn't admit. That pull only grew sharper in the quiet hours, evenings when my wife turned in early. Complaining of another headache, Lily and I would linger in the living room, the TV murmuring low like background noise to our silence. Her arm grazing mine, and instead of pulling away, she let it rest there. The contact burned, innocent on the surface but charged underneath, her fingers trembling just enough to tell me she felt it too. I swallowed, throat tight, imagining how easy it would be to close that last inch. The craving turned into something I couldn't outrun. In bed beside my sleeping wife, I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, replaying the almost her sigh, the softness under my hands, the way her eyes had lingered. Shame clawed at me, cold and sharp, reminding me of family dinners long past, my brother's laugh as he introduced her. "She's family now," he'd said, proud, yet here I was, hungering for what wasn't mine, the guilt twisting like a knife even as the desire flooded hotter. Then came the night everything tipped. My wife had gone to bed early again, the apartment hushed except for the low hum of the fridge. Lily sat across from me on the couch, knees drawn up, her gaze flicking to mine more often than it should. A single brush of her hand against my arm as she shifted, and suddenly the space between us vanished. Our mouths met in a rush, desperate and trembling, the kind of kiss that tasted like stolen time and forbidden heat. Her hands clutched at my shirt, pulling me closer, and the world narrowed to the frantic rhythm of our breaths, the way her body arched under the weight of what we'd both been fighting. Clothes slipped away in a haze of urgency, her skin warm and yielding against mine, every touch sending sparks through the dark. She whispered my name, soft and broken, nothing like the way she said my brother's. In that moment, surrender swallowed us whole, the ache finally breaking into something raw and consuming. All the walls crumbled, morality dissolving into the overwhelming pull of her, the gravity too strong to resist any longer. But as the quiet settled afterward, her head resting against my chest, the reality crept back in, heavy, unforgiving. What had we done? The question hung there, unanswered, while her fingers traced lazy patterns on my arm, and I knew with a sinking certainty that this was only the beginning of the fall. After that first time, we couldn't stop. The apartment became a minefield of stolen glances and hurried heartbeats. While my wife stood under the shower, the water running loud enough to mask everything, Lily would pull me into the narrow kitchen, her back against the counter, my body inches from hers, the steam from the bathroom drifting like a veil we both pretended wasn't there. Just for a second, she'd whisper, her breath warm against my ear, and I'd feel the pull again, that gravity dragging me under even as my mind screamed to step away. Our hands would find each other, fingers intertwining too tightly, the heat of her palm burning through every excuse I tried to build. Evenings stretched into dangerous territory. My wife would retire early, citing another headache that left her curled up in our room, door half closed like an unspoken permission we never asked for. Lily and I lingered on the couch, the television flickering with some forgotten show, its light casting soft shadows across her face. One night her foot brushed mine under the blanket we'd shared for warmth, and instead of moving, she let it stay. The contact sent a slow wave through me, her skin soft and insistent, reminding me how perfectly she fit against me in the dark. I swallowed hard, the ache in my chest mixing with something sharper, hungrier. This is madness, I thought, yet my leg pressed back, just enough to answer her silent question. The secret encounters piled up like hidden debts I could never repay. A quick moment in the hallway when my wife stepped out for groceries, Lily's fingers grazing my wrist as she passed, her eyes locking on mine with that same trembling need. Full nights when my wife visited her parents again, the apartment hours for stolen hours. We moved carefully, every touch weighted with the knowledge of how wrong it was, her whispers filling the quiet with words that felt like confessions and curses all at once. "I can't stop thinking about you," she'd say, voice barely above the rain tapping against the window, and I'd pull her closer, hating how alive it made me feel compared to the routine waiting in the next room. Then the fragile balance shattered. I was in the shower one morning, letting the hot water try to wash away the night's remnants, when I heard my wife's voice from the bedroom, sharp, quiet, the kind of tone that carried years of shared history and sudden doubt. "Whose name is this?" she asked when I stepped out, towel around my waist, still dripping. She held my phone, screen lit with a message from Lily that should have been deleted. The words hung between us like smoke, thick and choking. Lily was in the next room, door slightly ajar, listening. I could feel her presence there, the weight of her silence pressing against my back. My wife's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall, her hand trembling as she set the phone down. "Tell me it's nothing," she said, voice cracking just enough to break something inside me. The air grew heavy, every breath labored, the three of us suspended in a moment that tasted like the end of everything familiar. I opened my mouth, the lie forming on my tongue, sweet and bitter at the same time. "It's complicated," I managed, but the words felt hollow, echoing the war still raging in my chest. Part of me wanted to confess it all, to let the truth burn through the deception. Another part clung desperately to the fire Lily had ignited, the one that made ordinary days feel electric. I chose the lie. I stepped closer to my wife, pulling her into an embrace that felt like both comfort and betrayal, murmuring assurances that tasted like ash. From the corner of my eye, I caught Lily's shadow retreating, her footsteps soft and retreating. The decision settled over me like a heavy coat, warm yet suffocating. That night, as my wife slept fitfully beside me, I lay awake staring into the dark, the ache returning sharper than before. Lily's door stayed closed, but the pull between us hadn't vanished. It had only gone underground, waiting. Now everything balances on the edge of a knife. My marriage feels like a fraying thread, my brother's face haunts every quiet moment, and my own reflection looks like a stranger's. I crossed into territory I can never fully return from, the hunger still simmering beneath the surface even as guilt gnaws deeper. The what-if circle endlessly. What if my wife had never seen the message? What if Lily had never come to stay? What if I had been stronger that stormy night? Yet even in the ache, a part of me wonders if the temptation would always win. What would you have done if a seductive young sister-in-law lived under your roof, her presence turning every ordinary day into a test of will? Would you have stopped before the fall or let the gravity take you too? The choice still echoes in me, unresolved, leaving only this lingering hunger that refuses to fade.